Hi, this is Scott Garibay, and today we're going to talk about the question, do you know why your players are playing? All right, so I'm going to give you the short answer. You probably don't, all right? So one of the things, the reason why we're talking about this today, I think this is a really important concept. Do Dungeon Masters know why players are playing in their Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition games? The reason why we're talking about this is Matt Colville. I recently watched a video by Matt Colville, and it was shockingly obvious to me that Matt Colville really didn't understand that his players are no longer playing in his game because they want to play in his game. There is now an aspect of celebrity that is attached to his game that shockingly Matt Colville is ignorant to, which I was just shocked that was the case. But he said some things in a video recently that told me he had no idea why his players were playing in the game, right? Because one of the things he was saying is that, like, he was saying, my players will say this, my players will say that, and I'll just talk to them, right? Well, one of the things that he can't really talk to them about is like, hey, a seat at my table is outrageously valuable because I'm famous, right? And frankly, if you tee me off, I can replace you at a moment's notice. There are 100 people who would take your space in a New York second. So Matt Colville will never say that to his friends because they're his friends, right? But that's there. And the fact that he is ignorant of that he thinks that they're responding to him in a natural way when his game is no longer natural. When you introduce thousands of spectators to a Dungeons & Dragons game, the idea that those thousands of spectators are not going to change the reactions of your players is ludicrous, right? But it is amazing to me how oblivious Matt Colville seems to that effect, right? And I thought about it. I was thinking, honestly, I think a ton of Dungeon Masters really don't know why their players are playing in their game, okay? So what I want to talk about is the reasons you might be missing, okay? So one, let's talk about the obvious first. So most Dungeon Masters, I think that their Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition players are playing in the game because those players want to play Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition, okay? I think that is true for about 10% of all players. Yep, okay? What's the reasons for the 90 other percent? And I'm going to list them off here, and I want you, when you go to your next game, I want you to think carefully and look at your players and think honestly, okay? Get rid of your own prejudices, right? And just try to come at this with a blank slate and stop assuming you know why your players are playing, okay? So here's the thing. People can play Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition for a lot of reasons. One of those reasons is that they like Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition, okay? I actually think this only accounts for 10% of all players. What's the next one? I think this is the most powerful draw to Dungeons & Dragons that is possible, okay? And that is one person getting time with another person that is not connected to screens. I can't tell you how incredibly valuable this is, right? If you're fortunate, now basically I understand table games is a complete misnomer right now, but we had 45 years where we played this game at the table, and I think in 2022 we're going to have time again where we're playing the game at the table. So I'm not going to talk about this short period right now. I'm going to talk about the majority of the game's history and the fact that Dungeons & Dragons is played at a table, okay? Except for this weird period right now, Dungeons & Dragons is a table game, okay? All right, so basically your players are going to play because they want to spend time with one or more players around that table in a way that does not require screens, right? So one of the things is the vast majority of young people today are playing a huge amount of video games, right? And so a lot of their interaction is through video games. That is one of the most weak relationship points possible. Guilds are horrible. Relationships over video games are absolutely strained. Terrible, okay? And what Dungeons & Dragons offers is 1,000 times more pure. That's the good friendship stuff, right? And most of the time when somebody wants to play Dungeons & Dragons, they want to spend time with a friend or with someone that they're fascinated by the intellect of, or if they're fascinated by the narrative power of, or if they're fascinated by the imagination of, right? And get this, right? This is not a small thing. Now, the players could be wanting to spend time with the Dungeon Master, which makes a lot of sense. We'll get back to that one. Or they could be wanting to spend the time with one or more of the other players, right? In a very, very interactive, personal way, which no other game gives other than Dungeons & Dragons, right? Now, the Dungeon Master themselves, a lot of people want to spend time with Dungeon Masters. Why? Because Dungeon Masters are absolutely some of the most creative, intelligent, artistic people on the planet. You have, and confident. In order to run a Dungeons & Dragons game well, you have to be confident, or you have to be like a trembling, quivering, like, I'm getting this done. There's a lot of that, I'm doing the DM thing. I'm overcoming my fears. Good for you. Great. I'm glad you're here. But the reality is the vast majority of Dungeon Masters are incredibly confident. And even the ones who are barely overcoming their fears are overcoming their fears, right? So Dungeons & Dragons players are incredibly confident. They're incredibly intelligent. They're extremely well-read. You got to read 900 pages to run the game, right? Like, they're well-read. They have rich vocabularies. They're artistic, right? And they're creative. It's no big secret why people want to spend time with Dungeon Masters. Dungeon Masters are, by selection, some of the most creative, artistic, intelligent people on the planet, right? So that's one of the reasons why. So that is a bit, and I think that is, I would say that 40% of the game's players come from not somebody who wants to play Dungeons & Dragons, but somebody who wants to spend time with another person. And Dungeons & Dragons allows that, right? So the other 50%, I would say there's another 10% who are absolutely in love with the game's mechanics, okay? They don't care about the other players. They don't care, and they don't care about the other players. They don't care about the Dungeon Master. What they care about is is the game becomes an excuse for them to make 20, 50, 100 characters, right? With the idea that someday I can play these. I am convinced that 10% of the entire community would just be happy making Dungeons & Dragons characters. There are people who just find joy in that, right? The other thing is, here's another one. Here's another 10%. The other 10% is people who are getting ready to be a Dungeon Master. People who realize they want a Dungeon Master, but they're sitting at the table to soak up the experience they need to be a Dungeon Master. That's very, very powerful and important. I would say that the remainder of the remaining percent is a varied mix of reasons. Here's a few. Print guardians. There are a lot of people like me who absolutely love print books, and there are a few better guardians of print books than Dungeons & Dragons, right? So the people who don't really care about Dungeons & Dragons, don't care about the play experience, but really like collecting books and reading books, and love the 256-page full-color books that are being printed. There's, I don't think it's a large percentage, but it is some percentage. And so you have this situation where you have a number of players who are playing for an array of other reasons, right? Some of them could be trying to connect with passed away relatives. Some people might have parents or siblings who have passed away, and then people are saying, "Oh, I remember this thing. I can play Dungeons & Dragons to honor them." And so you see people coming in. Another percentage is because they saw Matthew Mercer or a streaming game, right? So streaming congregants, right? People who, basked in the glow of a streaming game, who was like, I would really like to try that, right? The other ones are explorers, people who are board game players or war game players, or fantasy novel readers who are like, I want to expand out my this part of this hobby by trying this thing that's tangential to the hobby. All those are reasons why your players are playing at your table. And it's very important to recognize these reasons, because then you can interact with them in a way that brings the game to life for them. But if you think your players are playing the game because they like Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition, I say there's a 90% odd that is not the case, and that is not the reason they are playing. And so that you should really be aware that your players may not be playing Dungeons & Dragons because they like Dungeons & Dragons. There's a ton of reasons to play Dungeons & Dragons for reasons other than I like Dungeons & Dragons. What do you think? All that's my opinion. What do you think? Do you think I missed any? Do you think there's reasons why players might play Dungeons & Dragons that I missed? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Let me know in the comments below. Please consider liking and subscribing, and have a wonderful millennium.